Hey, Circle Take listeners, thanks for joining me. Today we are talking to writer, director, actor Greg Travis about the first feature film he directed, the 1984/2015 film-noir vampire comedy fantasy horror film, Dark Seduction. So, as always, before you listen to the show, here are the Circle Take rules. Rule 1, we always talk about spoilers. Circle Take is a deep, deep dive, and no plot turn is sacred, so you have been warned. Rule 2, before you go any further, you should watch this movie. I promise you, while it's possible to listen to this podcast without seeing the film, it's a million times better if you watch the film first. So before we get started, today's show is special because you should not only watch this film, but Greg Travis also produced a documentary about the saga of making this film, which is available for free on YouTube. Just Google 30 Years of Dark Seduction. Now, this is important because what we talk about on Circle Take is the filmmaking process, the creative process of how the film was made and how Greg matured as a director. What we do not cover in this show is why it took 30 years to complete. Honestly, it's an amazing story, but Greg did such a good job of explaining it himself in the documentary, and aside from the fact that Greg has told the story in other interviews, it would just take the entire show to go through. But trust me, if you watch that doc, you're going to want to watch Dark Seduction immediately afterwards. So, how to watch Greg Travis's Dark Seduction. As of the recording of this show, Dark Seduction is available on iTunes and Vudu. Of course, if you just have to have a DVD, you can get one on Amazon. So, only a few ways to see it, but still totally doable, and it will be worth it. Greg Travis's Dark Seduction. Get a hold of it and give it a watch.
All right, guys, everybody one, please.
Voila.
Straight away, guys, hold the talking. Here we go.
All right, guys, pictures up.
Pictures up.
Pictures up.
Let's roll sound.
Sound speed.
This is Greg Travis interview, take 1.
Mark.
And action.
This is The Circle Take, conversations, insights, and lessons from directors about their first feature film. I'm your host, Jason Schmid. I'm an independent film producer. In 2006, I directed my first feature film. And over my career, I've had a chance to work with dozens of first-time directors, and I continue to find the experience fascinating. My guest today is writer, director, stand-up comedian, and actor Greg Travis. Greg is a veteran actor and comedian who has been working in film and television in front of the camera for over 30 years, working with such A-list directors as Zack Snyder, David Lynch, Paul Verhoeven. Greg also has a career in stand-up comedy where, among other things, he's performed all over the world as the character David Sleaze, the punk magician, clips of which are available on YouTube, and I have to say it's worth checking out. Greg set out to direct his first feature film way back in 1984, but amazingly, after 30 years, the film was only just released this past October in 2016. The film is called Dark Seduction, and as the perfectly extreme genre-matching poster for the film aptly describes, its hard-boiled versus vampires story is centered on a classic film noir private eye who's searching for a pair of 1980s new wave punk-style vampire girls who use their sex appeal and charms to do the dark seducing the film's title alludes to. The film was shot on 16mm black and white film, and a recent review of the film by the premier horror fanzine Fangoria wrote, "Dark Seduction really shows how artistically fluid and fully formed the actor-director Greg Travis is. While it's a film that some might undeservedly put in the so bad it's good category, there isn't a single thing bad about this newly finished and wonderfully entertaining noir piece of gold." Greg Travis, welcome to The Circle Take.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So good to be here. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations. What did you think when you read that review from Fangoria? They're sort of the gold standard of the genre.
Yeah, I had gotten the word that they were going to do the review, and so it was about 3 months later when it finally came out, and Ken said, "Oh, we finfinally got someone to do it." So
was it like 3 months of like nail biting? What are they going to think?
No, not really. I'd kind of forgotten about it actually, because you're hitting so many different places with the press promotion of a film. You hit them and you hope for the best, and then keep going forward. So,
And then to get a review like that from them must make you just feel really good.
yeah, I was real tickled. That was one of our better reviews. So,
For sure.
Yeah, I was real tickled that they
Yeah.
liked it. And it's like it's an odd thing because it is a film noir, and a lot of the younger generation are not as familiar with film noir as we were growing up. Like when video came out, I couldn't get enough film noir to catch up on all those movies.
Let's quickly play a little clip to give the audience a sense of like what this genre is. There's a moment in the film that I love where the lead character, this private eye, is working the beat, and he's on the street. And he goes into Natasha's shop, her little psychic shop. So the scene starts with this classic film noir image of our this low angle looking up at him, and he's on the street, and the Taft building's behind him. It's a classic noir image. And then we go into this scene with this just classic noir dialogue. Let's listen to this.
I was tired of barking up the wrong tree. Was about to pack it in when I spotted a little place called Natasha's. The locals call her the Bad Tooth Fairy. I thought I'd go drill her for some answers.
I'm sorry, we're closed.
The door was open.
We're closed.
I need a few things.
I said we're closed.
It won't take a minute.
That's too long.
What's the hurry?
To get rid of you.
What's in the back room?
You got a search warrant, pig?
What makes you think I'm a cop?
I can smell a dick a mile away.
Just what are you afraid of?
Not you.
Yeah, well, you'd better be, lady. You just better be. Because I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm drunk, and I've got a bite on the side of my neck the size of a fucking $50. And if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'm gonna blow you away.
Well, in that case, what do you want to know?
And that pause is what really makes
It's everything.
That
It really
long
is.
pause
It's
while
just
she's
great.
thinking about
blowing
it.
smoke at him
blowing
casually.
Smoke, yeah.
Oh, he's got a gun pointed in her face. It's just everything about that scene is just like so perfectly noir.
Yeah.
So the way I like to do this is kind of in stages of how the film is built. So let's first talk about this project as it came to you. You were kind of roughly fresh out of film school, right?
No, I had, in 78, 79, I was going to film school. I came out here and went to film school at Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. And then at the same time, I had started doing audition night as a stand-up comedian. And so I kind of took off as a comedian relatively quickly. Within like 6 months, I was doing a national TV show, and before I even had a full act together. And so I started working, as a middle act in some of these clubs around the country within like a year. So by 1980, I was up and running as a stand-up comedian. So that kind of
sidetracked your
sidetracked
filmmaking
me.
career.
Yeah, I mean, I it was a good thing. I was still in the entertainment business, but I was on the road and I was out there. But while I was doing that, I was always making a short or experimenting with these. The little Panasonic cameras came out, and so we started making shorts with those instead of Super 8 or 16 millimeter. So
I feel like the shorts you were making back then were almost like what viral videos are now.
Yeah,
like you guys
exactly.
were like way ahead of your time to making like really short, funny little wacky films.
like 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And they were just, self-contained little comedy shorts and parodies of movies,
Right.
different little, ideas that we came up with. And we had the 3/4 editing came out. So that gave us the ability to kind of cut with before that, we'd go from machine to machine,
Right.
and try to edit that way.
Painstaking.
Or we would transfer the footage to 3/4 and edit on a 3/4 system,
Right.
And then it would be on 3/4. We did that a few times.
So you're out on the road, you're doing
Yeah.
comedy, you're making these wacky short films with your friends.
Right, and
then-
that went on for about 3 years. And then in about 83, I made one, and that's where I met my partner, Steve Bouchard. I had been making them with David Daniel, who's my buddy from Texas, and he lived in New York, and his wife was the girl who played Vera. And so we did one called Home Life, which was about this wimpy guy who's wife was this big, large woman who was having an affair with his best friend. And, there was just this real kind of John Waters style, strange little, story. And so that's where I met Steve Bouchard. And so then later on, he had this idea of a vampire film that he wanted to do. And
Now, did Steve come to you with the idea of I want to do a noir film? Or I want to do a vampire film? Or I want to do a vampire noir film?
he wanted to do a vampire film in black and white. And so then I came up with the idea, well, we need a detective. And that would give it a film noir feel. And so, we bounced around. He had like a 20-page script, which was basically the vampires going from one victim to another. And so then
It was a collaborative effort coming up with what makes the most sense for what we're trying to do.
And then
here.
so we added all of these scenes with the detective, and that's why it was so difficult to cut it together, because we sort of added it as we went along. And I had these actor friends, comedian friends, and I go, oh, he'd be great as this character, and he'd be great as this one, and yeah, let's spend a whole day shooting this scene. And
Do you remember how long you spent working on the script before you were shooting?
not very long. Not very long.
Do you think not long
I
enough?
would say within a month we got started into production.
That's fast.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, from that 20-page script that he had originally, and then I just kept adding scenes to it and typing it up and then rewriting what he had. And yeah, it took off relatively quickly. And I don't really remember why, other than we just really... I think there was some equipment and there was some sound stage that we were getting because it was the 1984 Olympics. And so because a lot of people were going out of town during that period where the Olympics were in town, we got some goods and services for free.
So the special circumstance of your shoot was we got to jump on this right now while we can get this stuff cheaper,
like we got
free.
the equipment and we got a
Right.
studio and we got this and we got that. So we better put it together now,
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so there wasn't really an opportunity to sit with the script and do some rewrites and rehashes. You guys kind of jotted it down and jumped into production.
Yeah, but I knew it needed that sort of film noir clip dialogue, and so and I wanted it to be funny, and so that's what I was going for the whole time.
And that's your background. So
Yeah, and
you
that's
wanna
my
play to your
background.
strengths.
So I had a pretty good idea what I wanted there,
And was there a particular reason that Steve tapped you to direct this film?
He probably wanted to direct it, but he felt like he needed somebody with a little bit more comedic chops, like me, maybe. We battled quite a bit because it was a battle for power
During production?
and he was coming from more of a seasoned background where he had been working at a commercial house for a little while.
As a cinematographer?
I don't know, as an editor and maybe a producer, segment producer and stuff like that.
And he was the DP on this,
Yeah,
right?
and he was the DP. And he had a little experience as a DP through other films that he had done. And it was good. It was good. But we just, I had the acting experience coming from it as an actor, and I could direct actors, and I could, and also I was more of a writer than Steve was. So I helped shape the script and get it into the shape that it finally was. And then we shot for about maybe 2.5 weeks, the first part of it, and then we came back about 6 months later and shot a few more scenes.
Let's go through the nuts and bolts of that, because that's one thing I want to cover in this, because these conversations, in my mind, are for filmmakers.
Okay.
And so I really want to kind of parse those details,
Sure.
because every film is different. The circumstances always change. So let's just quickly go through the kind of nuts and bolts of this production. How many days was the principal photography?
I would say no more than probably 13, 14 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you remember if you were, I know this is funny because most people are like, they remember because it was, a year ago.
Yeah. But this was
is a
30
long
years
time
ago. And so I don't really remember.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing.
Do you remember, did you do
Because
five
I've seen the paperwork. We did
Right.
have an extensive paperwork. So it was about 12 to 13 days.
Did you do
originally.
like 5-day weeks, 6-day weeks? Or you just blow right through it?
It took us about 3 weeks to get those 12 days in, 12 or 13 days in.
Okay, so it sounds like 2 days off. Give everybody a little breather.
Yeah.
Was there any moment where you considered shooting on video? This was like 1984. Video was pretty new.
No, because we didn't understand that we could do that. A video was a video and a film was a film.
So film had to be shot on film. No questions asked.
A feature film had to be shot on film. No
Right.
questions asked.
Amazing.
There was just no option. And, actually people probably at that time had shot a feature, but mostly documentaries.
Yeah. And the video quality at that time was essentially VHS, which is garbage.
Yeah. But you could get away with a TV documentary on a good 3/4
Sure, but not a
camera.
movie.
But not a movie,
Right.
no.
And then how big was your crew?
On bigger days, we had extra camera people and extra help, but basically 6-person crew.
Really small.
Sound, 2 people on camera, 1 person on lighting, myself, Steve, and a makeup artist and a art director. So 6 or 7 maybe.
And was there like a traditional lighting kit, or was it sort of like a kind of an ad hoc situation?
We had some lights, and we got some extra lights from an associate of his. So
Kind of pieced it together?
yeah, kind of pieced it together. Yeah, depending on what we needed.
Was this, and this is a long time ago, the contracts have all changed since then, but was this done as a SAG film?
No.
This was
It was a non-union
and you
film,
didn't really
yeah.
have to
because we had
pay as much
mixed.
attention then.
We had. I was barely in SAG by then. I had done a few little things. I think I was SAG then, but a lot of the actors were not. So it was, and our leads weren't. So
Right.
we
So
couldn't
you didn't need
justify
to.
it. So we
Yeah.
didn't really need to. Yeah.
I assume you didn't have permits.
Oh, no. No, I actually got a police officer to stop traffic on Hollywood Boulevard so we could do that scene where Jones is out on the street.
In front of the Taft
front
building.
of the Taft building,
So
right on the street.
you're not shooting on the sidewalk,
No,
shooting up to the Taft.
we're
You're
shooting
out
in the
middle
of
the
this Hollywood Boulevard on that shot, yeah.
Gone are the days, my friend. You can't do that anymore.
Well, I don't know. I did it in the documentary. We walked all the way down Hollywood Boulevard without any trouble, so...
That's that's crazy. And then you said about 6 months later, after sort of a rough assemble of the film, you went back and did about how many days of pickups?
About 2 weekends. 2 weekends, about 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That
Yeah.
seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
So then the big behemoth on this film is really post-production. So
Well, because
it seems
we
like,
run out of, we just did, we threw together, the actual production and we deferred a lot of the payments. We did pay the crew a little bit here and there. We spent a lot of our money on obviously the lab work, at
Just developing the
PhotoChem,
negative.
developing the negative, getting the work print. And then once we were into the post-production, we had all the work print and we started organizing it. And instead of hiring a real editor, we tried to do it ourselves. We did have a, what are those upright moviola things?
Yeah, the green
and then
ones.
we had a flatbed.
Yeah, like
with the
Steenbeck.
Later on, we had a Steenbeck, but we just had the roller things, the little...
oh, the by hand ones.
yeah, by hand
oh,
ones.
geez, yeah.
So we're organizing the film with that and a moviola,
Right. So there's a really long story about why it took 30 years
Yeah.
to finish this film. It seems like more than anything, your film was caught in the cracks of the changing technology from the old school analog to the new world digital.
Right. Later it was. In the 90s, it started to get into that.
It's, well, I mean, obviously,
But up
there's
until,
sort of
see, like, I had to go back out on the road, and Steve was sort of in charge after we shot the film of the post-production because he wanted to be. And he, was trying to do the music, and he was trying to do the edit, and he was trying to do the sound effects. He was, adamant about finishing it himself.
and there was a certain point where that just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, we lost our office at Hollywood Boulevard. He moved everything into the second room at his Studio City apartment, and we were on our way. He was actually getting, by 86, we had a pretty good cut.
But most of the time during this, you're on the road. You're working.
I'm on
You're
the
doing
road,
comedy.
I'm working,
You're
I'm
acting.
coming back in, and I would put a little money into it, and and we would get whatever we needed to get. And
Keep feeding the beast,
feeding
essentially.
the beast, exactly. Finally, the cut that he came up with, we showed to a few people, along with the music that he had done and whatever effects we had, sound effects or whatever visual effects we had done. And it just was laying there. It wasn't working. It was too long. It was too chaotic. And, You know how when you don't have all of your sound work in there and you've got the dialogue is kind of dry. And
Feels naked.
the timing of it wasn't right and it just feels clunky and, it wasn't very exciting. And
Well, it's also hard to sell that to a test audience when you're trying to bring your film to like, even if it's family and friends.
Right.
And you're just like, hey, great group of people.
And we had done another screening like that of Family and Friends at Photochem on a much earlier cut. And that motivated us to really to write the extra scenes and go back and shoot that 6 months later, So we did get a cut within 3 months and showed it at Photochem, but that's what told us, oh, we got a lot more work to do. We need to fix this and this and this. And so after a couple of years, he just kind of ran out of steam on it, and I ran out of steam on it, and we weren't able to find it. And so it just kind of laid there. Yeah.
And then you did run into like a bunch of technical snafus along the way with technology changing. And
then in the 90s, that's where the sound sort of came in.
And the whole craft of negative cutting sort of went away, so there wasn't anyone to do that.
Right.
But I'm thinking about, as a filmmaker, there's this moment over these 30 years, for a few years at least, I'm thinking, where you just had decided it was done. It was never going to happen. You let it go.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, after I got all the sound work done and I was really feeling great about that, because I'm a big believer in sound. I really put a lot of work into the sound job.
It's obvious because this film sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I listened to this film on headphones in the middle of the night, and it is crisp and clean. It's almost hard to... Actually, let me ask you that. How much of this film is ADR?
Not too much.
Because it is fantastically preserved. I don't know how much cleanup work they did in post-production.
Well,
once they got it digitized, but it sounds super clean.
Yeah.
Kudos to your sound guys on a super micro low budget movie. It sounds
my
fantastic.
guy Robert Ryder, cleaned everything up, and we had a mix. I mean, we had started to mix at Cube Post back in the 90s when the very first Pro Tools was being used to transfer everything over to it. So we had started the mix then, and then they went out of business, and then that's when I just really sort of like hung it up for a while because I just couldn't, I'd spent so much money on that I just couldn't keep dropping, a lot of money into it.
Do you feel like having that moment in your life where you accepted the idea of this film never being finished? Do you feel like coming back to it after that gave you a fresh look at it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
That helped you to make it better?
Oh, big time. Yeah, because, when you're away from something, you just get a complete... And you continue to grow as an artist and grow as a filmmaker. When you come back to it, you just go, oh, I see this problem and that problem. And you just... you want to fix all these things. And so after I did Midlife, I've got, That
was your most recent feature.
That was my most recent. And in 2012, we did that and then finished it and got it out there in 2013. And then I said, I've got another old film laying around. I wonder, if I can finish that one now, and then I'll have at least 3 features to kind of...
You've got that sort of post-production mojo happening.
Exactly.
You're in the mode.
You're in the mojo. Yeah, you're in the mood to do
Take
that.
it on again.
Exactly. And so that's what got me interested in it. And then finally finding it and putting it all together and then finishing it. Oh, it was such an ordeal. I mean, it wouldn't sync up. It wouldn't.
I'll recommend for anyone who's interested in the details of the calamity that caused this film to be languishing for so long. There's a documentary on YouTube that you can check out, and it's a pretty extensive look at what went down with this film. What's the name of the documentary?
It's called 30 Years of Dark Seduction.
Just look it up on YouTube. It's well worth a watch. It's also really well crafted. It tells the story really well. It's super enjoyable to watch. And you just want to give this guy a hug when you're done watching it because Greg is the Job of filmmaking. Every time he tries to pick up the film again, the filmmaking gods just slam him down to the ground again. Let's talk about some mistakes. So much of filmmaking is correcting the mistakes that happen along the way. It's never about how well you did when things were going great. It's about how well you did when you recovered from every possible thing that could go wrong along the way.
Yeah.
As we've clearly seen, IMDb will work hard to find every nuanced problem with your film. Is there anything that sticks out to you that just kind of gets you, and you're like, oh, that one?
Well, there's a few. I'm of the belief that some of these little things are fun to kind of like leave in there, and kind of like like there's a scene where in the bar where Dick Jones is in the bar, and he's doing his thinking out loud thing, and the narration is over it and everything, and a waitress comes up, but we can actually see the French guy at the beginning of the film with the two vampire women in the back of the bar, sitting at a table in the background.
Who's supposed to set up? He got killed.
Yeah,
in the
he
opening
got
scene.
killed a long time
Right.
ago. But when we shot the film, we did an intro scene of them at that same bar meeting him, and that got shifted around and changed around, so it no longer made it into the movie. I put a little bit of it in the documentary. A little bit of the meeting scene. But because the detective, I thought it'd be cool to have him, looking for them, and there they are in the bar behind him.
Right.
Comedically, it was a funny idea.
Right.
But it didn't quite play because we didn't know who that was back there.
Right. Was there anything that you just found yourself in post-production just not being able to fix? That just...
I got really lucky with not too much. We cropped it a little differently, so the few dips that microphones had done before didn't really matter.
What aspect ratio did you
It
originally
was
want to shoot
16
in?
by 9 in the cropping of this version, but the original thing was shot in as more of a squared version
Oh,
of a 16 millimeter.
like a traditional full frame.
Right, traditional full frame, but I wanted it to look more modern, so I
Right.
cropped it a little differently, yeah.
At what point in the process did you decide to recrop the
On the negative transfer.
Okay.
Yeah,
at
when I
that point.
transferred the negative, I did the cropping a little differently.
And did you do any up and down
For some
shifting?
reason, there
to
was
sort
a
of-
little. There was a little headroom on a couple of scenes that always bothered me, and so I wanted to try to fix that problem. Yeah,
so that
so
just
that cropping helped that a lot. Yeah.
So sort of the modern taste of a 16 by 9 frame sort of gave you a new opportunity to reframe the movie. Essentially.
Right, and it made it a little more modern than it was because it was
Yeah.
a very squared frame before.
I bet. Yeah.
so
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the final portion of the show, which is the circle take.
Oh, okay.
And this is the part of the show where we try and gain the knowledge of the experience and this is a really particular situation for you, and we touched on this a little bit before we started the show, is that although this was the first feature film that you shot as a director,
Right.
this isn't the first feature film you finished as a director. You actually started and finished 2 other feature films in between shooting and finishing this movie.
Yeah, that's true. That's
so
true.
you were a different filmmaker approaching the final edit of this movie.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, much more seasoned editor, and so much more knowledge that I'd gathered along the way as far as sound and music and picture. I was a big fan of Russ Meyer's editing style and Orson Welles, and these guys go pretty fast. They're like, and I think Martin Scorsese's a big fan of Welles's editing, kind of fast editing style as well. And I think it kind of like keeps the movie modern and keeps it viewable for me for years to come if the film kind of has a nice clip pace to it.
Yeah, it's
And that
interesting.
was what I was always trying to get in the editing, but until I got it on digital, I couldn't really get it the way I wanted to. Cutting on film, there's something very timid and scary, and if you make a mistake, going back and fixing that mistake is a major ordeal.
Do you feel like you were more willing to let mistakes go back when you were cutting on film, as opposed to once it's digital and it's so easy to hit
Well, you're afraid
Apple
to make
Z and just undo
Yeah.
that and try it again?
Totally. It's user friendly. I mean, you can do anything you want on digital, but without any fear at all. But when you're cutting on your work print, if you cut it too tight, then you've got to go back and not only readjust that and put those frames back, but readjust the sound that you've just cut to match the picture. And there's another hour of work, it's just so time consuming.
I mean, I almost wonder if it was better for the film to have waited 30 years to finish.
Oh, absolutely. I had got as close as I could possibly get in the early 90s. And the problem with the early 90s version would have been the music track would have been, I had 2 other soundtracks done, over the years for the film. And then this final one.
You mean score?
Scores.
So
Yeah.
there's 2 other completely finished scores
2 other
for this film
complete
that we've
scores.
never heard.
Steve did the first one, and another guy named Aaron did the second one that never made the cut.
Wow.
Because by the time this version rolled around, I go, okay, I need a whole new soundtrack because it just the other stuff was too synthesizer. It was too dated.
Well, it's funny because the soundtrack that you have now has that in the documentary. Your composer actually mentions Blade Runner, and it does have that sort of classically 70s synthy, growly texture to it. But it retroactively works perfectly for these sort of new wave punk rock vampires. It's perfect for them.
Well, that was the thing. It was a very 80s thing because when Blade Runner came out in the 80s, that was the movie we all were worshiping.
Sure, and it was the modern noir.
Yeah, it was the modern
perfect,
noir.
yeah.
So I'd use that temp score as a temp score.
I mean, imagining you're sitting down with an aspiring filmmaker. So here's someone who's maybe made a couple of short films. Maybe they've gone to film school, maybe they haven't. But they're beginning to think about, it might be time for me to make my first feature film.
Right.
What kind of advice do you have for someone like that?
Well, there's 2 things as a filmmaker. I mean, and Wells talks about this too, not as much as he should have, but you are a bit of a hustler. If you don't have the money to throw into it and to do it the proper way, there's always a way. And you have to search around and be a little bit of a salesman and be a little bit of a charmer and find a way to get whatever it is you need done. And there's always things that are negotiable. There's always people that are willing to work with you if you, really push it, Just the money throwing at it is not always the best way because sometimes you overpay for something that might not cost you much, but if you've got a big fat checkbook, you'll write checks for things you don't need to write checks for,
It seems like you maybe did a little bit of that early. In post, like you got done with the movie, you sort of throw some money at post-production, go back on the road, say, you guys work and I'll be back later. And then
exactly.
It just sort of fumbled along for a while.
And then also, the more you pay people, the less work they want to do for you, For some reason, the less you pay them, the more work you get done. I don't know why that is, but in the independent film world, it really is the case. And I would just say don't give up because the money's not there. There's different ways now to raise a little bit of money. I did raise about $2,500 to do the negative transfer, and I was able to raise that on one of the sites, not Kickstarter, but
like Indiegogo.
Indiegogo, exactly, Indiegogo. And, it wasn't quite 25. It was like close to it, but It was enough to get the job done. And so that was great. And that really gave me the inspiration to go ahead and go all the way with it and finish it up, and developing relationships with my different post-production people, different editors and different sound people and music. I think that's important. As you go along, you want to try to develop a group of people that will work with you on little side projects. You pay them when you can with bigger projects. And then if something comes up, a little short, they'll sometimes help you out, on smaller projects when it's not taking too much time or money.
Is there something you did on this first time out specifically that the next time you made a film, you're like, I'm not doing that again?
Yeah, you've got to be real careful with your casting and also casting of your crew. And a lot of the people that were working on the crew, I didn't know at all. That were supposed to be working underneath me as I'm the director on this thing. But my partner had hired, or brought in several people, some good, some not so good, So that's a big thing you've got to watch out for is you want every person to be really good. You want to be able to get along with everybody and not have anybody do an ego trip on you like, sometimes you run into that kind of thing, and it can really just slow down the creativity and the production.
And do you think that applies to department heads, or do you think that goes all the way down to like the PAs and everybody on set?
I think it goes all the way down to the PAs. I would say also you just keep learning as much as you can about, films and studying classic films and like watching a director's work from A to Z and looking at what they did and trying to figure it out, and then reading about that director. The same time, like I would go through every director and watch all their films from the beginning to the end, and then I would read a biography about them at the same time. So I felt like I was, getting the essence of sort of who they were, and then learning about and then studying their work at the same time.
Never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
Greg Travis, thank you so much
Oh, my
for being
pleasure.
on The Circle Take. Before I let you go, if someone wants to go check out Dark Seduction, where can they find it?
They can find it on iTunes, Amazon, Hulu. Oh man, it's on a lot. It's on about 12 platforms now.
Well, that's great. It sounds like it's super easy to find.
The Midnight Releasing is the distribution company, and there's a page on Midnight Releasing website that has all of the locations where it is. But just punch it into Google, and a lot of them will come up.
Great, fantastic. Well, I really recommend the film. It's just an absolute blast.
Thank you so much.
thank you
Dark
so much.
Seduction, check it out.
We will. That's our show for today. The Circle Take is produced by Blue Apples Media. Our music is written and performed by Corey Fader Jacobs. Check him out at themasterfader.com. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, where there's many more episodes to check out. You can like us on Facebook at The Circle Take. We're on Twitter and Instagram at The Circle Take, where we'll share photos from our conversations, updates, and previews of upcoming shows. All of this and more at our website at thecircletake.com. I'm Jason Schmid, and as always, you can circle that one.